Good afternoon. I'd like to call the special meeting on expulsions to order and ask Mrs. Bass to please call the roll.
District 1, Barbara McQuinn. District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill.
She's here. She's on the phone in the back.
District 4, Erica Whitfield. District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Here.
Let the record show we have 6 board members here. This time, we have no items to be added, no items to be withdrawn. And does anybody want to pull any items from the consent agenda? We're in the expulsions. All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Motion by Dr. Robinson, second by Mr. Barbieri. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next item is we have no speakers, and we'll move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by, pardon? We're on the expulsion meeting. Oh, sorry about that. Mrs. Andrews moves the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So that concludes our business on this meeting because there's no additional items on new business. So at this time, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Dr. Robinson, second by Mr. Barbieri. All in favor, all opposed. We stand adjourned. And what's our next thing? Attorney. All right, so at this time, the board will be leaving the room and going to an attorney-client session. So, Mr. Littlejohn.
At this time, I request advice concerning a pending litigation matter. The subject matter of the meeting shall be confined to settlement negotiations or strategy sessions related to litigation expenditures. Daniel Chiarta versus the School District of Palm Beach County, case number 918CV80514-DMM, Judge Donald Middlebrooks and Magistrate Judge Dave Lee Brannon. The persons attending the attorney-client session are board members Frank Barbieri, Deborah Robinson, Barbara McQuinn, Marcia Andrews, Karen Brill, and Chairman Chuck Shaw, Superintendent Donald Fenoy, General Counsel or Deputy General Counsel Blair Littlejohn, District Attorney Shantoya Bernard, and Lisa Coring, and the court reporter. This session will be recorded by a court reporter. No portion of the session shall be off the record. The transcript of this session shall be part of the district's public record at the conclusion of litigation.
The board will now begin the attorney-client session in training room A. The subject matter will be related to strategic or negotiations related to the expenditures for litigation purposes, and the session is expected to last 30 minutes. So we'll go back, and then after that, we will come back to close out the attorney-client session, and then we have a risk management session after that. we got everybody back. We okay? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I'd like to call our meeting to order and let the record show that all 6 board members are still here. So at this time, we'd like to ask Ms. Wanda Paul to please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Paul, the best part of that is to watch the expression on everyone else's face when I start saying, and we'll ask, and that smile of relief that goes when somebody gets called. So thank you. Dr. Fenoy, we have workshop topics. The first one is the budget update.
Yes, at this time, I'd like Mr. Burke and Ms. Heather Knuth to go through the budget workshop.
All right, yes, thank you and good afternoon. I just want to warn the board up front, we're likely to go through a wide range of emotions as we go through this budget workshop today, from potentially disappointment and anger, hopefully to hope and peacefulness by the end. But that said, you got a little bit of dose of this on April 4th with the legislative workshop, but just to kind of recap a little bit, this budget process that played out for FY19, at the state level, and as a reminder, what happens in Tallahassee really dictates our revenue to operate our schools each year. And this year, we were a little disappointed because we started out with some optimism that the state board and the governor were seeking a $200 per student or 2.74% increase. When the legislature got going in January, the more realistic number fell to 1.37% or $100 per student. And then we had the horrific tragedy in Parkland, and the whole focus turned to adding funding for school safety and mental health. And at one point, the governor had proposed, that $500 million in new money be put on the table to help pay for those efforts. But at the end of the day, the legislature really kind of redirected the resources that typically would have gone into the base student allocation and helped us deal with rising costs and provide some money for employee salary considerations. We really saw all that money get earmarked and mandated that it be spent on school safety and mental health. So at the end of the day, we went from just 1.37% increase per student to 1.39. The $100 went up to $101.50, and the base student allocation statewide only went up 47 cents, which is a nominal amount that really doesn't go far. So that really drives our revenue, and now we're working through to bring you a balanced budget recommendation. This gets in a lot more detail, but the FEFP, I know you're getting accustomed to kind of these FEFP budget runs, but real quick, we're expecting to grow. The state has projected almost 2,800 new students. We feel like that's kind of high. Our own local forecast was a little lower, but so we've put a lot of that resource out into our schools to deal with our own projected enrollment growth, and then the rest of some of that money we have to hold in reserve to see if the kids really materialize. You'll see shaded in gray some of the mandates. We've got the Safe Schools, that's almost $6.1 million, and that's for both district and charter schools. Then the teacher classroom supply assistance is going up from about $250 per teacher to $300 per teacher, and those monies pass right through to teachers in the classroom. And then the new mental health allocation of $4.3 million. Just kind of jumping to the bottom line, some of this enrollment we're going to share with charter schools, some of the growth. We've estimated right now the 2,800, potentially about 1,800 would be hopefully in our schools, and then about 1,000 students potentially in charter schools. And that's truly an estimate. We've seen the last few years the charter schools come in much lower than projected, and this year for the first time we actually saw a little bit of a decline in charter school enrollment. So we'll continue to monitor that. The bottom line there on the net increase was $31.2 million. And of that, a big piece of that is tied to the growth, the additional 2,800 kids. So those monies are tied to providing the teachers and the services and passing some of that through to charter schools. We also have a local policy to keep our contingency reserve at 3%. So there's money that needs to go into that, about $1.5 million to keep that on pace. We had an increase in our FRS contribution rates that we must fund. That's going to cost about $4 million. And you can kind of just see how the money is spoken for, and then also those new initiatives with safe schools and mental health, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. But the disappointing or the bad news piece of this is, at this point, we're about $300,000 in the red. Granted, on a $1.9 billion operating budget, that's not bad, right? We expect to be able to manage that, and as we close out the books on FY18, I'm confident we'll be able to get that covered. But the more troubling piece is at this point, there's no money set aside for employee salary increases for next year's consideration. And I know that's one of the board's budget priorities that we identified early on in this process back in December. And we're struggling to make good on that with the money, the very limited revenue we got out of Tallahassee.
Mr. Burke, I think Mrs. Brill has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was
Thank
getting
you.
carried away.
Well, first thing I want to ask is if you would please slow down, because this is really important information, and you're going so fast that my brain's not keeping up. Just going back to that first slide, maybe I missed something because you're going fast. I don't understand the column heads. I don't want to sound like an idiot, but what is this 2018 to 19 conference? I mean, what?
Oh, okay,
I don't,
sure.
I don't understand what, and the conference increase, decrease, so I'm sorry, but.
Oh, okay, yeah, no,
You
my
lost
apology.
me.
Let me explain that. So our funding's driven through the state funding formula, the FEFP, and the FEFP is calculated throughout our school year. So the current year is the 2017-18. That third calculation, what that means is the state recalculated our funding based on the actual October FTE. And that's kind of what the third calc represents. So that's our base year. That's the current school year. And then the 18-19 conference, March 8th, what that reflects is when the Senate and the House got together and they conferenced on the budget. This is the agreement that was reached and the budget that was ultimately brought forward to the governor, and he signed on March 17th, I believe. So this is, all this data here, it takes it from the state level and it really drills down to Palm Beach. And it gives you the calculations that really drive our funding. And it starts with the unweighted FTE is basically our student enrollment. Weighted FTE is we do have some program cost factors for the ESE and the ELL students and a little bit for vocational programs. And I'll just point out real quick, you can see that base student allocation. Statewide, it's still at $4,200. It's going up just 47 cents. We do still have the benefit of the district cost differential. And so we get like a 4.3% kind of positive adjustment to that base student allocation. And so as a result for us, we're actually seeing our base student allocation here in Palm Beach County go up $2.17, which unfortunately still that doesn't go real far. And then the rest of that calculation, you basically kind of take the weighted FTE and multiply it by that base student allocation, gives you that big number of about $937 million in base revenue. And that's the revenue we have the most flexibility on. And that's, it's going to teacher salaries and employee salaries, everything within the operating budget. And then, the FEFP formula has within it some categoricals where the legislature is very specific about how much money they put behind, whether it's the ESE guarantee or SAI funding or reading or safe schools. This year, the focus was on increasing safe schools and then really creating that new categorical for mental health. So this is just kind of, some people get real interested about this calculation because if the charter schools are paying attention, they can tell by these numbers and they can kind of go back and forecast what's going to happen to their school budget. And then, Ms. Knust will not let me do a presentation without including these two pages because this is her bread and butter. But the second page of it gets into some of the other components, the class size reduction categorical funding, our lottery funding. Now, lottery funding, we get this question sometimes, where's all the lottery money? You can see it's at $9.8 million, but the vast majority of that goes to the school recognition program for schools that get an A grade or a raise their letter grade. And then we get a small amount for discretionary. And what that goes to now is our school advisory councils to get $5 per student towards school improvement, and they hatch their own plans on how to best use those monies. So the lottery funding is a small piece of our total budget, and it's really kind of earmarked too on where it's spent. The tax roll then comes into play to figure out how much of this money, when the state says they're going to fund X amount per student, then there's a split between state revenues and local taxes. In Palm Beach County, because we have a relatively high tax roll, we end up paying about 70% of our funding per student through local school taxes. And really, there's, by and large, it doesn't benefit you really to live in a wealthy property county or a poor one, because the whole premise of the formula is to get everybody kind of to that per student amount with some adjustment for cost of living through the DCD. So that, all those calculations is really how I got to the $31 million in new money. And that carves off the piece that's expected to go to charter schools. And then we look kind of on the margin from one year to the next. Where's our rising cost? What money is earmarked, and what money must go to serve the additional students we're expecting? And that's kind of where I got to the bottom line. Once we take all those things off the table that we know about, we're basically breaking even here and slightly in the red, and it's a manageable number. The one thing I want to point out, so I shared the bad news that, there's no money for potentially, it's going to be very difficult to come up with money to negotiate salary increases. The state has continued this Best and Brightest scholarship program, and this did help our teachers. There's some concerns about this program and the nature of it, but it is out there. Our teachers and a few of our principals brought home about $16 million through this program last year, and this will continue. The same rules and everything apply for the upcoming school year. So that is one thing that's out there. Now these are one-time bonuses. So they don't count towards the employee's pension benefit, and they're non-recurring. They get paid out in the spring, and that's it. We always, at this time of the year, we still got a ways to go with the budget, but we keep an eye on our enrollment projections. We'll be waiting to see which schools will be required on that low 300 list to have the extended day. And I think we shared last time that formula's changed a little bit to go to a 3-year average, which is actually a good thing. So there should be less volatility in the schools falling on and off the list each year. And hopefully we're not just we've talked about the yo-yo effect of giving resources only to pull them away 1 year later. So that should stabilize a little bit. And the tax roll is going to be interesting. The state projected 6.4% growth. We had about 7% last year. But what we're hearing from the local property appraisers, it could be as low as 4%. So we're watching that very closely. This matrix, this chart, we've been working hard ever since the board adopted our strategic plan. Part of that is aligning our resources to support the strategic plan. And this is kind of just a overview of the changes for next year. Now, a big piece of this, where you see positive and supportive school culture, and $10.3 million. That is, the $9.3 million of that is the new Safe Schools money for school resource officers and a mental health component. And then on top of that, we've been able to shift about $900,000 of existing resources to add some MTS coaches in a handful of our schools. And then so there's some shifting of resources. There's the state categoricals, and this just kind of shows you how things are changing and how we're dedicating resources to support our initiatives within the strategic plan. The two biggest issues for this year, of course, are the Safe Schools allocation. We estimate that about $5.5 million of those dollars will be for district-operated schools after the charters get their share, and there is a requirement that we put an officer in every school. We've estimated it'll take 75 new officers to do that, and we've put those positions in the budget and advertised them for next year. We're actively recruiting, but there is, in all likelihood, we will not be able to find 75 qualified officers for the start of school on August 13th. So we are also working with our sheriff and the other municipalities that have their own police departments to work out potentially contract arrangements where they could augment our force as needed until we can fully staff up, and that we'd pay for that service. So we'll continue to keep the board briefed on that. It is imperative we get those agreements in place, because otherwise I think we'll struggle to meet that mandate to have an officer in every school. And just a little on the money, so we're getting $5.5 million. That comes very close to covering a lot of the costs of those new officers, the salaries and benefits, but it's not going to provide everything we may want. If you really look at outfitting the officer with all their equipment, and this assumes that the current starting salary, if you're going to provide a vehicle, that cost could rise to as much as $8.7 million, so over $3.2 million more than the state's providing. At this point, our focus is on getting the officers hired and staffed, and we're going to have to kind of worry about the vehicles later. But so there's some limitation. And then on the mental health, our share is $3.9 million. I'm working with our Deputy Superintendent, Mr. Oswald, and how to best use that $3.9 million and trying to leverage it as far as possible. $3.9 million does not give you enough money to try to add a position to every school. So they're going to have to take a team approach and potentially contract with some of our other agencies across the county to provide some of those mental health services. And we're kind of working through those scenarios now. But there are requirements on the mental health side, too, that, we have to have a plan by August 1st. Next school year, the schools will have to have their what they call threat assessment teams in place, which is a mixture of school administration and school police and staff to kind of meet each month and evaluate any concerns they may have. And we're working through that.
All right, Mr. Burke, Mr. Barbieri.
Sir.
Mr. Burke, has there been any discussion in Tallahassee about what happens after the first year? I mean, they're giving us money to hire 75 officers, or almost enough, and then we have to absorb that cost in the budget next year? Is there any discussion up there about them continue funding these officers that we're supposed to hire?
There's no positive discussion that's going to probably lead to more money. There's concerns being expressed across the state. Palm Beach County is in much better shape than a lot of other districts because we were starting from a place where we had already made a considerable investment in having our own police department. So we're not starting from zero. We only need 75 officers. There could be districts that need, luckily we don't need 187, or the money wouldn't even touch it. So we're in a little bit better shape, but what they also hold up as an option if you're worried about the money is we've got that Guardian program that is potentially at a lower cost, but there's a lot of reservations, and our board's already taken a position, that we're not interested in arming people other than police officers. But I haven't heard any good news on that front.
All right, Mrs. Brill.
I know this is an update, but are you going to give us exact figures or come back to us with exact figures of what our shortfall is and how, under our current budget, we're going to address it in terms of the security and in terms of the mental health piece?
Yes, we will be coming back. The board will be asked to adopt a tentative budget, I believe, August 1st. So we'll have much more detail at that point. We are working hard to try to work within the money available, and some of those contract arrangements would need to be negotiated. So those conversations are taking place, but I don't have hard numbers yet to tell you. And it's a little bit of a moving number as far as, to the extent we can recruit new officers and staff them, we're less dependent on the outside agencies. So it may even, some of this may be an estimate right up until the start of school, but we will tighten it up.
Just as a follow-up, I know that you're working hard to work within the money we have, but we obviously have to work within the money we have. We have to do better than trying. And I know you said you worry about vehicles later, but I think we have to plan that now also, as well as the officers, because that's going to be a part of it.
It is. We've never guaranteed that every officer would have a vehicle. We've with the reductions to our capital millage, that really hampered our ability to buy more vehicles. The sales tax did provide some relief, but it would be very hard within the current revenue constraints to try to provide vehicles to the entire force. I would have to bring back a series of unpopular alternatives.
Well, final follow-up is that maybe that could be a part of the MOUs that you're working on with the other municipalities and the sheriff.
The contractual arrangements would include a vehicle. Yes, that would be a piece of it. It's more on our side.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And we were talking about that pot of money for the Guardian program that we're not participating in. Are we actually working with the other school boards and superintendents to see how we can get some of that money so that we can purchase some supplies and equipment, additional updated equipment for our police department?
That is a push across the state. No one really expects the entire $67 million to get spent, so the superintendents have been very outspoken about, once you determine how much is left over, let's free that money up and put it into the school safe schools allocation to provide more law officers or help with some of these other costs we're talking about. All right, so just on the timeline, the budget process is a marathon. It's not a sprint, but we've got about 6 months behind us, and things will heat up over the summer as we close out FY18 and go through the whole truth and millage process as we set the tax rates. Well, actually, the legislature has set them for you, but as we bring those to the public and hold our 2 public budget hearings in August and September. There's also a very significant piece of our budget that's time sensitive, and our current operating budget since 2010 has been dependent on a voter-approved millage levy for school operations. And you may recall the quarter mill. Of course, the legislature at one time, the board had the authority to levy that quarter mill for critical needs. In 2010, we were required, if we wanted to maintain that millage, we had to go back and ask the voters to approve it. And our Palm Beach County was very supportive. They passed it by 66.45%. And the maximum duration you can levy that millage is for 4 years. So we were back in front of voters in 2014, and we had even stronger approval at 79%. Also, though, on the ballot in 2014, you may recall the Children's Service Council was up for the renewal of their whole agency. And I think that benefited the two campaigns. Both were so important to children. The Children's Service Council did a lot of work to help educate the community, and I think I attribute some of that spike to their work. But this quarter mill is critical to us. It's 650 teachers. It's expected to generate $48 million next year, and it's imperative we get back to the voters and, at a minimum, give them an opportunity to renew that, because it supports the fine arts, the choice programs, the career and technical ed, and we know our community values that. The ballot language from last time in 2014 is just provided there. I don't think you guys are familiar with it. The one thing I do want to remind the board about is the statutory authority that's granted to the school board for these type of referendums for school operations. They're capped at 4 years. The board can actually go to the community and ask for millage levy to bring them up to the 10 mil cap. In Florida, there's a 10 mil cap on taxing authorities for the county, for the cities, for school districts. We're nowhere near the 10 mil cap. But typically what you'll see districts do, and we've seen Orange County do it, we've seen Sarasota do it for a long time. More recently, Manatee just passed one in March. They'll levy up to a full mill. They'll levy a full mill for school operations. And I think it's important as we contemplate this to look at our recent history with our taxes. I've been telling you a big driver in the state budget the last 3 years has been the insistence to roll back our school tax rate. This was led by Speaker Corcoran. We saw it play out for 3 years, and as a result, you can see in the red number there, the required local effort, the biggest component of our school taxes, has been reduced 0.925 mils. So we're almost down a mil just in these rollbacks to the RLE. That may not, 0.925, that doesn't sound like a big number to you. When the way that plays out, if you were to look at restoring 0.925 mils for FY19, that would bring in about $1.7 billion statewide for education, or $178 million right here in Palm Beach County. So these little, chipping away at the millage has a dramatic impact on the revenue available. Just going back a little further in history for Palm Beach, specific to our tax rates here, when the quarter mill first, when it was approved from FY12, and you can see it there on the voted operated millage, but look at our total millage levy. At that point, we were at 8.18 mils. And now in FY19, the millage rate you'll see this summer is going to be about 6.576 mils. So we're down over 1.6 mils in a relatively short period. And again, we're well below the constitutional cap. So I believe these taxes, they truly are historically low, nowhere near the 10 mil cap. And we're seeing the results of this kind of ongoing tax cuts. Governor Scott is wrapping up his 8 years as governor for Florida. I've been paying attention to some of his comments as he kind of looks back and says of all the things he's done for education. I think truly the best measure of that is to look at how has our funding per student truly changed since he took office to when he will wrap up here for FY19. And the total increase on a per student basis was 7.37%, but that's over 8 years. So it's less than 1% a year. And then also you got to think when Governor Scott came in 2000, January of 2011, so his first budget was really FY12, we were in the height of the recession. So this growth is even from a very depressed point. If I go further back to pre-recession numbers, we've only grown 1.4% over over a 10-year plus span. And our rank has fallen from 39th in the country to 42nd as of FY15. Now, his legacy will really not be cemented until we have the national comparison for FY19, but I suspect Florida may fall closer to the bottom. And I just mentioned this, so yeah, Florida 42nd in the country as of FY15. We're, the national average is $11,392. We're about 22% shy of that at $8,800. That $2,500 per student, shy of the national average, equates to $482 million a year. So it is a concern for Florida and the direction we're headed. And then inflation has played a part too. This chart goes back to pre-recession. The state was at $7,306 per student. For the school year we just finished, we got to $7,296. You would need to be at $8,137 to truly cover the cost of inflation over that 10-year span. And for next year, the funding is going to be about $7,400 per student for FY19. So we'll finally get back above where we were 10 years ago, but we're going to be nowhere close to dealing with inflation. And that's why we're in this kind of perennial struggle to balance our budget and to provide meaningful salary increases to our employees. Teacher salaries in Florida are 36th in the country, so that's doing a little better. I think that shows the efforts of Florida school boards to prioritize teacher salaries despite funding at the 42nd rank. But if you look at our teachers, they're earning on average just under $49,000, and that's based on teachers that have an average of 11 years of experience. And the national average is $57,379. So they're about 15% off the national average, or nearly $8,400 per teacher, which is considerable. All right, so the big decision that will be coming before the board is if there is an interest, we do have this ability to go to the voters and seek additional millage levy. The quarter mill, as I mentioned, will provide $48 million next year. This next window on the millage levy, while we have to go to voters in 2018, it really impacts your board starting a year from now, really, FY20 through FY23 for that 4-year window. At that point, for FY20, a quarter mill is expected to generate $50.8 million. So that will continue to fund all our fine arts teachers, and our choice may even allow us to add a few more. If we were to go for a full mill, you could generate $203 million or an additional $152 million a year. And that's where we would have a great opportunity to really step back, look at our priorities, and address some critical needs. The top of the list is, of course, school safety. I mentioned that the state money is only going to go so far. If we wanted to increase that millage, a good portion of it could go to school safety initiatives, including providing vehicles for all officers. We could do a 4-year lease to align with the referendum, and that would be one problem quickly taken care of. We could also look at all the different other equipment needs to make sure we have the best police force of school districts in the entire state. The other piece, the big piece of school safety of equal, if not even greater importance, is the mental health. And we have $3.9 million currently to work with. Passing this millage, we could potentially have $20 to $25 million to work into mental health and take care of the school police. We could provide MTSS coaches to all schools. We could have more teams of psychologists and family counselors. We could really have a great program that would lead the state and address some of the concerns we have. And then we would, of course, continue the fine arts piece and the teachers. And then you may recall when we bargained with our teachers union last year, there was a big concern about the compression of our teacher salaries. And it's a real concern. We agreed through that last contract to have a joint committee of the CTA leadership and their team, along with the district team, to really study that issue and develop recommendations. And what we've seen over the years is, our starting salary not too long ago was about $36,000. And over the last several years, we've raised the starting salary to $41,000. And where we're seeing the pain point is that the teachers that may have came in at $36,000 7 or 8 years ago, they're now sitting at maybe $43,000 or $44,000. They're not much further ahead than the folks coming in brand new at $41,000. So we do have this true compression where a lot of our teachers are kind of on the front end of that salary schedule. A full mill levy would allow us we dedicate about half that levy to retaining teachers. We are having trouble keeping teachers in the profession, especially in Palm Beach County. If they get 4 or 5 years into their profession and they want to start a family, they realize it's very expensive to live here, and often we lose them to other parts of the country or to other professions. And there's enough, this would be able to significantly impact compensation for our teachers. We have looked at, we feel like there needs to be some anchor points in the future for teachers that they can look at and say, look, if I stick it out 5 years, I would be entitled to a retention supplement. And some of the recommendation, we're still tightening this up, but you could do, potentially there's enough money, you could do a $5,000 retention supplement once you get to 5 years, and as much as $10,000 when you get to 10 years. And so there's some real upsides to considering this additional millage. And we're not asking the board for any action at this time, but I just want you to think about the possibilities and how it could help us meet our budget priorities. Of course, we've got to talk about the impact on our homeowners, our property owners in Palm Beach County. That current quarter mill equates to $25 per $100,000 of taxable value. 1 mill basically equals $1 for every $1,000 of taxable value. So if we were going to go from a quarter mill to a full mill, that's basically an additional $75 for property owners per $100,000 of taxable value per year. And then we just broke down, so if on a, you want to break down that $75, that's could be about $6.25 a month or 21 cents a day. Now, granted, a lot of our property owners are going to own homes that are worth more than $100,000 in taxable value, so you may have to multiply that a couple times. But that gives you a feel for what that impact is on homeowners. I would try to remind homeowners that they have enjoyed tax cuts for 3 years, and while it is technically a tax increase, you could argue this is in somewhat a restoration to meet our priorities.
Mrs. Brill.
I'll wait till.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just about done. I appreciate your patience. A lot to cover today. But the timeline to bring our question, and we've always gone to the voters in November as part of the general election, and that's preferred in many circles because the good side of that is you're giving as many members of the public a chance to vote on it, because that's typically when you get the biggest turnout. So that timeline looks like we would come back to the board on June 20th with a recommendation to either continue the quarter mill or to go for more, along with a spending plan. And that decision would be on June 20th. Then there's a requirement that any ballot initiative must pass through the county commission. So we would be on their July 10th agenda to get their approval to place it on the ballot. Their approval is very limited. They're not, it's a ministerial process. They're not really weighing in on the merits of the ballot language or anything. It's just procedural that we need their approval then to take the final step, which is to provide it to our supervisor of election. And for the November 6th election, she will need that ballot language by August 24th. So that's the path we're on. There has been some talk, there will be an August primary. There's some pros and cons, mainly because of the Constitutional Review Commission and the length of the ballot we expect to see, or we will see in November. But in the final analysis, we feel like the larger the turnout, the better for our school district. It also gives us a runway and some time to educate the community and take advantage of starting the school year and being able to educate our parents, our employees, the community at large, and really make our case, particularly if we're going to go for additional millage, on why it's so critical to us and what they could see in terms of benefit from making that investment. So that concludes my presentation. We're happy to take any questions, Chairman Shaw.
Questions. Mr. Burke, one quick question on the timeline and the ballot language. Is there an option that we could have 2 questions, one of them being on the quarter mill to continue what we already have, and then a second question on the additional 3/4 mill?
Unfortunately, there's not. I've verified that, but the board is only permitted to present 1 question to the voters, and it's also, you can only do that once every 12 months.
Okay.
So
all right.
you
And the
could,
timeline?
the only option would be you could do, say, a $500,000 in this November, and if you decide in a year to come back for more, or 2 years, maybe in the presidential election, you could do that. But one has to replace the other.
Mrs. Brill.
I love how you snuck in that $500,000 instead of the $250,000 this November. But anyway, I just wanted to share my thoughts and just tell you that, I do fully understand that we have to do the $250,000 in November. I'm very worried because of the length of the ballot. We're going to be on the last page. There are a lot of concerns, but the security and teacher salaries, there's not any person on this dais that wouldn't say they're our top priorities. But I personally think we need to see a clear plan. We need to see more data. The voters recently approved the sales tax. It would be, it's going to be a big education process for them to understand the difference. And I know that you and I spoke about, what that full mill looks like with the house values, whether it's going to be $200 or $300 more per person. But we also have reports coming into us next month from different entities regarding our security. So I would ask before we make a decision, I'm afraid to sacrifice that $250,000. And the easy solution is always going to be, say, go out for taxes. I don't know that the public has the appetite for more right now, so I think we need to see what the polling is. We need to see what our clear plan is. We need to see whether we have to make any adjustments to our plans based upon the reports that we're going to be receiving. So I welcome the discussion. I realize August would be too big a rush, but let's just be really careful because, we could go out for the $250,000 and then go back in 2 years for another half or whatever, we would need. But just if we ask for too much, we may be risking a whole lot.
Yes. Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. And Mr. Burke, when I spoke with you, it was clear that today we're just actually in the discussion mode, and you are actually doing some background work. Yes. Now, we've been talking about this for a while. This is just not new, this presentation today. Can you tell me what kind of research and information you've already done so far? I know we still have a way to go, but can you give me a little backup of what we've learned so far about investigating this opportunity for our teachers, for the security?
Yes. Right, and I appreciate all the comments, and I share this, we have to really analyze this decision, and the risk versus reward is great, and, we are heavily dependent on that $250,000. I would hate to see us have to try to balance the budget without it, and we've got 650 jobs on the line, so I fully appreciate that. So a lot of thought is going into this. The other side of it is, this is the only opportunity for the school board to bring more revenue into the district. And I know there's when you look at the community's expectations for safety, or when we face our own teachers and, as disappointed as we are with the legislature and their inability to provide meaningful increases, this is kind of the only avenue we have if we really want to change the course of our school district significantly on the financial front. Part of this process, right, we need to go out to the community a little bit and test the waters and see what support is there. And that's what we'll be spending our time doing between now and June 20th. So the superintendent and I can come back to the board and say, we've heard from the public and we think there's an appetite. They understand the importance. If that support does not materialize, then our focus would immediately shift to we really need to hang on. Please at least continue the $250,000 for the fine arts. I don't think anybody would want to live through those budget cuts. And those teachers are having a huge impact on our students. The whole reason we're in this, we made the decision back in 2010 to safeguard the fine arts programs in art, music, and PE and choice, because we were watching districts around the state deal with the recession and cut those programs. So I think it was a wise thing to do, to say, look, we're going to dedicate this millage to making sure that we don't find ourselves in that position. But with that, we have this every 4-year requirement to go back and get that continued. So it's a big decision. I fully appreciate it. It's been on the top of my mind for many months, and we're continuing to work through it.
Mrs. Andrews?
And just to follow up, we know we're not going to get any more money at this point in time from the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act. I mean, that has not been declared as recurring.
So there's one other pot for campus hardening on the facility side. There was a one-time allocation of $99 million statewide. We are going through all the process of applying. It's basically a grant, and we have to do an assessment of each school facility by August 1st, and then we're eligible to apply, and we will be doing that. Ms. Brill mentioned the sales tax. That's an excellent point. We need to remind people the sales tax was for strictly infrastructure and capital budget needs. It has nothing to do with operations. This is all about operations and running our schools. The sales tax was also in response to another kind of failure by the legislature when they cut our local authority from 2 mills to 1.5 mills in 2008 and 2009 and never did anything to restore it. We accumulated, you recall, $900 million in deferred maintenance. So we finally got again to the breaking point where we said, look, the only way to fix this is to turn to our local community. And Palm Beach County has a good track record of supporting our schools, and I'm hopeful the community will kind of rise to the challenge again.
Just the last follow-up question, Mr. Shaw. It's really important that we contemplate this. I think it's truly critical that we get the quarter for our art, music, PE, and so on, but we've got to do the other piece. I mean, this security issue is a real issue. The money that we have received from the governor and legislature, we're thankful for that, but that's not going to meet our needs. We already know that. And when we're talking about recruiting and retaining teachers and teacher salaries, and we have no money at this point in time, we've got to do something immediately. So my suggestion right now to this board is to make sure that while we're contemplating, we know we have to go this route, that we start looking at some polling. We begin to look at people who can begin to help us develop a plan of action. And certainly there is a need out there, but I would like to see you come forth with some real concrete information on how we can take our next steps, because it's really important to educate the public, and we've done pretty well in the past and doing it ourselves with some additional help. But I see moving this next level, everybody in this building, everybody everywhere will have to do some additional work to make this sale, because it truly is for our children, our teachers, and the safety of our schools. So are you ready, everybody ready to kind of take this step? I think it's going to have to happen, but I don't want to wait for another month's board meeting or another weeks and weeks and weeks without you coming back and telling us what the atmosphere is out there.
Absolutely. The work is underway, and with the board's calendar and with graduations, we may have to do some of that through individual meetings and updates through the superintendent, but we will make sure to keep you aware.
Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, I mean, I know you are doing polling, so, which is important for us to hear. So hopefully you'll be able to come back and, as you said, let us know if the polling looks good for an increase or if we have to stay with the quarter mill, because, as you said, we don't want to take a chance on losing that quarter mill. We have these other needs, but we've got to make sure before we take that step that we're not going to be basically throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as they say, if we move too quickly on something that the public doesn't have an appetite for.
Understood.
Any other questions? Mr. Barbieri.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Burke. I agree with Mrs. Andrews and Mrs. Brill. I had the opportunity recently to speak to the Greater Boca Raton Chamber of Commerce board, and there was probably 40 or 50 business people in the room, and I told them how we hire, 1,000, 1,200 teachers every year, how we lose 50% of them the first 5 years, basically because we can't pay them enough to stay here. And I got a couple comments afterwards about why don't we pay our teachers more money, and I tried to explain to them. So there's really I know you guys are going to be addressing the Economic Council next week, but I think it's wider than that. I mean, there's a lot of business people in the county that don't understand, that don't have any information or knowledge that we do have to hire 1,000 teachers a year, and we are having difficulty finding qualified teachers, and that we don't pay them not because we don't want to, it's because we don't have the money to pay them. And then, in all the schools I've been visiting, because the PTA's been inviting me to come, and of course the parents are there all concerned about security, and the question keeps coming, why can't you do this and why can't you do that, and why can't we have more psychologists in the schools and more mental health? And the question always comes down to, and my answer is because we just don't have the money. So, I mean, there's a lot of demand out there, and I think we just need to make sure, as my colleague said, that we tell the story, that they understand that that we just don't have the funds to do everything that we need to do to make sure that we can keep quality teachers, that we can get the mental health issues under control, which has made, obviously, international news about mental health failings and how we haven't caught kids that are people that do these terrible things. So, I think we need to make sure that we tell a good story and we do it as quickly as possible, and that we get all the facts out there. And especially, we're going to need the business community support on this, because I'm sure we can get teachers and parents to vote, but we need to get the business community behind us. So it's important that you get that story out to all, and maybe you should meet with each one of the chambers and proactively go out and try and find all the different business groups in the county and speak to every single one of them.
Absolutely. I'll meet with anybody who will listen. I feel really strongly about this. One other thing I didn't mention, but I think it's relevant, is the Constitutional Review Commission has 13 ballot questions. One of those questions proposes that any future tax increase requires a 2/3 supermajority approval of the Senate, both the Senate and the House. So what that means, we've just gone through 3 years of no tax increases for school taxes. They basically, when you roll back the tax rate each year, that means you're capping the local contribution to education across this whole state at the same amount of money you had 3 years ago on a dollar-for-dollar basis. If that amendment passes, the odds are we will never see the local contribution grow into the foreseeable future. And to me, it's dangerous for this state to think that that's just going to put pressure then on the state revenue to fill that void. And what I've seen for the last several years is they don't worry about really filling the void. We just get less and less. And the mandates and the expectation for more services continues to grow. So I really hope we can educate our community and that they'll see the benefits of, we may not want to end up like the rest of the state. If we want Palm Beach to truly continue, I think we have a good track record of kind of outperforming a lot of parts of the state, but you can only, you need money to do that work. And Florida needs to be careful because we're heading down a pretty dark road.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So when you said MTSS coaching almost in every school, I know you said that to just suck me into agreeing with
Mr. Oswald tipped me off a little bit, and Dr. Fenoy, but I've been paying attention too.
And I must say, it worked. Okay, I mean, but and with this additional information about what's potentially on the ballot, requiring this 2/3 from Tallahassee, that adds some urgency to it for me. But I think that in addition to the business community, we need to market ourselves to like John Q. Public, right? And I think that part of that has to be, the magic word is transparency, but I think we have to show that we are not wasting money. Right? Everybody thinks that there's something there that could be cut that's essentially non-functional that we could just cut and use that money to do these other things. I don't know what those things are, honestly. But I think that somehow in this we have to think about how do we share that with John Q. Public. And was bouncing around in my head, and I know that this is really out of the box, but maybe it's even something where we just say, like, what do you think we could cut? So we defend ourselves, or maybe somebody has a magic question that we would go, but it wouldn't meet our need. But I'm just saying, I think we have to expose ourselves in a way if we're going to ask for this money essentially on the back of the sales tax. So I don't know how to approach that, but I think that we need to be clear we need to be truly transparent and open to criticism, suggestions, and that we truthfully and authentically respond.
I agree, and I welcome that. And just real quick, I would offer people this if they're watching. I mean, our operating budget is 80% people, salaries and benefits. And the vast majority of that, 95% or something, is in our school sites. And because I've gone through this exercise with our school principals. So when you bring in the principals group and you say, who on your staff can you live without? Because that's where all the money is. There's no answer. There's no good answer, And a lot of those people are now required to be there for class size reduction requirements. If we want to continue to be accredited, we need to have media specialists and things like that. And we already know our counselors are spread too thin. So I'm confident we can have that level of transparency. I don't think we're going to have the magic question that says, hey, we just found, just to come up with a 1% raise, we need to find $10 million. That's a big chunk of people. And, I think we've got a lot of hardworking employees. The big support departments are transportation and maintenance. We need those functions. So I'm open-minded to it, and I welcome the transparency, but I think it'll help build our case and our argument.
Dr. Robinson?
So along that line, I think also remember that people tend to frequently ask if we're top-heavy, right? Do we have too many people in this building or in other administrative positions? And I think as part of that marketing, we start doing comparing some metrics. You mentioned, for example, the guidance counselors, and we could say we have however many students per guidance counselor now. The recommendation is this: we are not wasting money there, right?
Right.
And so, and generally speaking, people seem to think that we're wasting money in people, in particular positions. And so I just think that we need to address that. I'm confident that we're not. I want more people
right.
in specific places, but I think that we need to explain that, and to whatever degree we can find metrics.
Okay.
Maybe from Council of Great City Schools, of course, but to whatever degree we can find metrics to compare, so they know we're really not, we're not top heavy. Maybe we compare the number of people in our, I personally think our curriculum department is short-staffed, so maybe we compare the number of people per 10,000 students in our curriculum department to other districts. But I'm saying show the metrics to show that we are not, we don't have this people walking around with clipboards and drinking coffee and doing nothing.
Yeah.
Andrews.
Yes, thank you for that. We'll do that.
Thank you, and I think the transparency is really critical, but we've done a great job as we've spent the monies that the public has entrusted with us for our needs, art, music, and PE, whenever the penny sales tax, all the kinds of things that the public has entrusted us with, we've done a good job. We've got to find a way to have a flow chart to show almost every referendum we've had here in Palm Beach County over the years and how well we've done with each. And certainly with the last penny, the penny sales tax, we can kind of talk about that right now because that's fluid and we're working that through as we speak, as well as where we're going with this money that the governor has given us. But I continue to think that we are going to have to get out of the box because we've been able to get this done with the public, with many of our administrators and our business people and so on. But we're going to have a cadre of people at every level, maybe an administrator in a group, as well as a teacher, a custodian, a bus driver. We can train people to go out and spread that message. And that's why I'm saying within 6 months, we've got a lot of work to do to get our people ready to go sell the message to the public. And I think when the public sees different people, Mr. Burke, I do believe in you, and you've been able to kind of keep us straight with what we're doing financially. But I think the public wants to see all of these other people, like the teachers, the art, music, and PE people. They need to be on these teams, as well as bus drivers. I mean, when we start talking about safety, our police officers need to be traveling in this team. Teams that will go to different locations. We're a big county, and we're going to have to be on the road in the evenings. You may not be able to go home every day for the next few months as we work through this process, because all of us will have a role to play, not just the administrative handle from this building or the principals. All of us need to get out there. Just putting the signs out this time around and doing a few visits, it's not going to work. We've got to think of a way to market ourselves with our human resources, too, in every corner of the Palm Beach County School District. I think people will see it and notice when all kinds of people are out there.
Right. Any other questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Burke.
Thank you all.
Any final comments you need to make?
No, sir, I think we covered it. We'll be back in touch real soon.
All right. Okay, we have two discussion items. First one, Mrs.
Thank you. I've been working closely with Kevin McCormick and quite a few parents, and I'm asking the school board for a workshop on the IEP process within our district, as well as not just that process, but how we're working with our ESC kids, our schools, talking about delays and denials of certain processes for our ESC students, allocations, school allocations, what's needed. I just don't remember having a workshop with some of the concerns I've been hearing from parents, from advocates recently about ESC. Kevin's working hard, Mr. McCormick, as well as the schools, but I think as a board member, I would like to get more information about all of these processes and how we can actually do a better job to make sure that we get the services necessary for these students.
Mrs. Brill?
Thank you, and I think that's a great idea, but I think I'd rephrase it a little. The agenda item said IEP workshop, and that worried me because the IEP is driven by federal law, and it's something that we as school board members are not able to put our hands into. But I did speak to Mr. McCormick, and I told him that I really would like to see us have a workshop on special ed law, and then how it fits in with our upcoming SP&P, that's the special policies and procedures, the laws that govern us, and then how that fits into the IEP process, because we do need to have an understanding, but we also have to be careful that we don't overstep our roles and responsibilities. And, there's no stronger advocate for ESC than me on this board, that because of my own experiences. So I would just ask that they bring back the SP&P and a legal piece for us so that we can have a clear understanding.
I want to reinforce what Mrs. Brill said, because that was my concern when I saw this being an IEP discussion, and that's most of that out of our control. So if that's the pleasure of the board, we will schedule an ESE-related workshop. All right, Dr. Robinson.
So thank you. This is a request that the board consider directing the superintendent to make sure that the opportunity to pre-register to vote is part of the 10th grade U.S. history course. And in addition to that, I would like to get, request that we make certain that as young people graduate, that the opportunity to register to vote is presented to them. Like this year, and forevermore. And I know that we've talked about that, and at least in some locations we do it, but I think it's a good time for a status check and maybe let the principals know, and we can pull in community partners and as well as the supervisory elections to get that done. So it's two-part. The original part is to make pre-registering to vote part of the 10th grade U.S. history course. I think it's just a perfect fit.
All right. I think, and my understanding is I think we do it, and I know the League of Women Voters is pretty active and is registering and recruiting volunteers to do that. And I know Ms. Booker is always asking about expanding that. So I think you got a good point made there. Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. And I think the League is really focused on children that have reached the age to vote. So I think that's perfect because a lot of people don't know that you can pre-register. And I brought that up at various meetings that I've had in my community, and I think it's a fabulous idea. So thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Robinson.
And just to include the status check for registering to vote is the opportunity. Maybe there's somebody who doesn't want to register, but the opportunity to register is part of your exiting process for graduation, and which would mean I would think that we need to pull in our community partners.
So is that a suggestion that as they walk across the stage, we hand them their voter registration?
No, that means before you get your cap and gown, you fill out this piece of paper. That's my view of it. So
principals take heed. So before they march, it'll be. Thank you very much. That concludes our agenda on our workshop. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Dr. Robinson, second by Mr. Barbieri. All in favor, all opposed. Motion carries 6-0. We now move to our special meeting, so I'll give everybody a moment to be able to refresh their computers and move to the next item. I'd like to call this meeting to order and let the record show that all 6 board members are still here. And at this point, Dr. Fenoy, any items to add or withdraw?
Not at this time.
Right, we have 4 items that have been pulled. Does anybody want to pull any other items? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda with P1, policy A1, and policy, or 3 items, policy A1 and policy O1 pulled? Motion by Mr. Bart. Yeah, Mr.
So
Barbier.
is policy 02 advisory boundary committee still on consent?
Yes.
So I'd like to pull that one off.
Right, so we have P1, policy 1A1, policy A2, or policy O2, and policy O1 pulled. So is there a motion to approve that agenda? Motion by Mr. Barbieri, second by Mrs. Brill. All in favor, all opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So we have no speakers or presentations, so we'll move directly to the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Mrs. Brill, second by Dr. Robinson. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We'll now move to new business. First one is CS1, Charter School. Dr. Fenoy.
I recommend the board approve the proposed Third Amendment to extend the charter with corrective action plan for Toussaint L'Ouverture High School for Arts and Social Justice, and authorize the superintendent and his or her designee to sign all related contracts and documents.
Motion by Dr. Robinson, second by Mrs. Andrews. I was going to call him Mr. Pegg to give a complete presentation on this, but since there were no indications we needed to. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Mr. Bernadelle, congratulations. Good luck. Our next item is P1, job descriptions.
I recommend the board approve the job descriptions as submitted.
Is there a motion? Motion by Mrs. Brill, second by Mrs. McQuinn. Mrs. Brill, you pulled that one.
Thank you. And yes, and I did speak to staff, although I didn't speak to Mr. Mitchell. But it was too late to make any change, and so I was told that I had to bring it up here. The change I want to propose, I'll tell you, and then I'll make a motion, but it's under the courier mail and courier lead mail job descriptions. Under the qualifications, it states knowledge of streets and roads in Palm Beach County, Florida, or demonstrated ability to read and follow maps. And so I said, follow maps? Nobody's using maps anymore. So I proposed that we change it to ability to utilize and follow a GPS, because first of all, it's safer. Nobody's using maps, and I did speak to Mr. Burke as well as Mr. LaCava about it. So unless you do you want me to make a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I move to change the qualifications number 4 under both the courier mail and courier lead mail. Number 4, qualification to read knowledge of streets and roads in Palm Beach County, Florida, or demonstrated ability to utilize and follow a GPS.
All right, is there a second to that amendment? Second by Mrs. Andrews. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So now we go back to the full motion to approve the job descriptions.
If I may just make a follow-up comment, when I spoke to Mr. LaCava, he did say that we might need to look at other policies because there may be other policies also that indicate the use of maps and any other outdated modes.
Yeah. Mr. Littlejohn, would it be appropriate for a motion that would allow just a regular administrative change to any policies that talk about outdated mapping and use GPS, or do we need to deal with each one individually?
I'm afraid you're going to have to deal with each one individually.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I kind of knew that was going to be the answer, but
Sorry,
I
I
was
know-
trying.
I know that's not the answer you wanted,
No.
but I think that you got to go through the rulemaking
So
process.
I
for
could
each
ask
one you
Mr.
wanna
Harris
change.
and see if he had a different answer, but I know that's no. So we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Our next item is Policy 01A1. Dr. Fenoy.
I recommend the board approve development of proposed revised policy 5.016, choice schools and programs.
All right, is there a motion to approve that policy? Motion by Mr. Barbieri, second by Mrs. Andrews. Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So first, let me say as nicely as I can that I was so very disappointed and dismayed at the tone of the answers I received to my numerous questions. Now, I know that I submitted these questions relatively late. I think that most everything that I asked about was discussed in the board workshop. But I'm taken aback by the tone. So let me just move on. So the line 26, I made the comment, not all choice programs receive additional resources. For example, Roosevelt Elementary. The answer was, additional resources include capital money, business partnership, advisory council contributions, and other non-monetary resources. Really? I didn't know that? I made the point that we have in a policy that the choice and career education programs are specialized educational programs that enable students to take advantage of additional resources and innovative teaching techniques, so on and so forth. And I want you to know clearly, and I made the point last time that not all schools get additional resources, but it's in the policy, and then I get an insulting response. So either we're going to make sure that all the choice programs have additional resources, or we need to stop saying that in the policy. So I'm just wondering which one should it be. I vote for they get the additional resources.
Dr. Fenoy.
Go ahead, Keith.
As policy or as new programs are coming on board, there is a process to review the particular budget and costs adding on. And over time, there's been a lot of new programs that have been added into our system over time. However, there are some financial implications. Staff is looking at how we currently allocate across the board of all programs and to try and take a more equitable approach to provide those programs where there may be similar programming from one school to another, but there is not funding for a particular school. So we're continuing to look at that, and we will bring that back, but there are some financial implications there.
Okay, so I think that last time I asked for like a spreadsheet, right? And so, if you can just give me like an ETA on that. But so, I mean, from what you're saying then, do we need to stop, do we need to remove this language from the policy so that we're not acting contrary to our policy? Or are we going to live up to expectations?
We're going to take that back and we'll look at it and we'll look at the spreadsheet. We're continuing to look at that. We have to look at all programs. You want to?
Okay.
So
moving on, line 98. I'm going to skip some of my questions. I'm not going to ask everyone. But line 98. So we have this language in here about the entrance to dual language programs. But we don't talk about entrance to Montessori. But as I understand the Montessori programs, we don't let you in a Montessori program after first grade unless you were already in a Montessori program.
Students have to be at that level, and I think we've discussed it. Under the question, we were looking at entrance in as in a pre-K or K or 1. So I believe what you're asking for is a description if it's after 1 that they have to have Montessori or pre-Montessori training or schooling in order to get in. And we didn't see that in the question, but we can obviously look at putting that in the booklet because I think we've discussed that too, and it's a good addition.
Okay, but so since we're listing in the policy the criteria for getting in dual language, should we not list in the policy the criteria for getting in Montessori and not just in the... Oh, I'm looking at the manual. So, okay, let me get my language straight. In the manual.
In the manual, yes.
Okay,
in the
so
booklet,
it
it describes the program, yes, but in the
Okay.
manual, yes, understood.
Okay. And then Okay, I'm going to try to skip some of this. So if I go to 280 to 283, I don't think I saw this the first go round. So it's the parent's responsibility to know that the program that they're requesting for their child is available in their home school. And as I recall, what I read is that they'll be bumped out. Their application will not be processed. Am I misunderstanding this?
Yes, when a parent is online applying, not children, we prefer parents apply.
Okay.
When they enter their address, the system automatically relocates where they are and what programs are available to them, and it only gives them the drop-down menus that programs that are available to them. Also within that is, do you want transportation, or do you pass on transportation, and it'll give you more options. So it really does go right back to, and we work with our planning department such, it goes back to exactly what options are offered per your address as we regionalize all the programs.
Okay, so adding the transportation drop down is a good tweak, so
Yes.
we don't get stuck in problems
Thinking you
that
have a
we've lived
big,
through
long ride
before.
and you're not
Right.
getting one, yes.
Or we're just not providing a bus for you, right? But, okay, so what I'm understanding then is you cannot apply. If my home school has a IB program, but I want my baby to go to Suncoast IB program, right? The computer won't let me apply to Suncoast IB program?
For full choice programs, you can apply. Every student in the in the applications for full choice, because full choice schools do not have boundaries, so they are able to apply. So if a child at Carver would like to apply for Suncoast, they're not held back because Atlantic has IB. They would automatically be able to go to Atlantic, yes.
So I'm sorry, but
No.
So if I live in Forest Hills boundaries, right, and I want IB, but for whatever reason, I want my baby to go to Atlantic's IB, the computer won't let me.
Absolutely, correct. Because it's
Okay.
not full choice at Atlantic.
Okay, so the computer,
Yeah.
okay,
First
I got
choice.
it. Okay.
Second choice, it may.
Okay, all right, thank you. And the same kind of question about this over 95% capacity? It won't let me apply if it's over 95% capacity, or how does, explain that to me?
Well, that was an addition by Mr. Barbieri, and in further discussion, we wanted to make sure that schools are, like, give an example, Boca High, where students are, there's so many students there, we want to actually see if students want to go outside the boundary and go to a medical program such as West Boca, which is a great program as well, because West Boca or Boca Raton only takes 35 students in boundary because they don't take a lot of seats. So this would give an opportunity for students in overcrowded schools to have an opportunity to apply to programs outside their school to obviously, lessen the load at the overcrowded school, but also give more opportunities for students in that school to see other programs out there. The question remains, do we allow them to apply to other schools that are over 95%? The schools that are over 95% are already getting an allocated seat, so it wouldn't increase that allocation. So moving it to saying that if I'm at a 95% or higher school and want to apply to a school that's got higher than 95%, it wouldn't hurt it in any way because the schools have already allocated the choice boundary seats to that, such as a kid from Boca Raton wanting to apply for Park Vista, which is over 95. It wouldn't change that. We could add that language in that they don't move, but I don't think it would alter that simply because the seats are already allocated at Park Vista to stay at their level. And that certainly is a discussion point because we've just recently added that.
Yeah, so I didn't understand that. So from a parent's point of view, can my baby apply for the program at the school that's greater than 95%?
As it reads currently, yes.
Okay.
If you're in a school that's over 95%.
But if I'm not, if my home school is a school that is 70% capacity, I cannot apply to a choice program in a school that's 95%? That's what you're saying?
If your school has the same program, no, you can't apply. A first choice, you can't apply.
But if it's the same program, we just talked about that in the previous section, unless it's all choice.
If
Okay,
it's
I'm
all
just saying,
choice,
that's
yes.
got- there's
If
something
it's
wrong
all
with
choice,
that.
they can apply wherever,
Okay.
yes.
I'm not going to beat this up. There's something wrong with that 95% thing.
We'll provide a follow-up clarity on that because the whole point of the 95% was to help relieve some of the overcrowding in some of our high schools where there was a similar programming, so that would provide some relief. but the intent to go to a school higher than 95%? No, that was not the original intent.
No, that's not the intent.
So we'll provide a written response back to the board and clarify that piece.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing I'm going to say at this point is this the thing with the template. When the lines 212 to 215, and I asked, is there a template that schools use to outline their recruitment plan, right? And the response said there's no template. A template with necessary items will be created with assistance from SSEA to distribute to schools.
It's a great recommendation. I do know that we do meet with our coordinators from every school once a month and talk about recruitment and diversity and making sure we reach out to every community. But if we bullet those items and give them an idea of what we want to see in their marketing plan, because this is more about marketing too, and have some consistency, it's an excellent idea. And I think
assist them.
Yes, absolutely.
Like Village.
Absolutely. So it was an excellent recommendation, and if we had more time, we would have jumped on it, but we're going to jump on it tomorrow. Well, they will, because I will not be in tomorrow.
Okay, so I'll leave all the rest of my issues to private conversations then. Thank you.
All right, other questions, Mr. Barbieri?
Dr. Lacotte, I apologize. I didn't have a chance to talk to you about this one, but you and I have had discussions about these in-house programs forever. Let's assume for a minute that Boca High School is at 90%, which is probably never in my lifetime going to happen, but let's assume it did. They've got a medical program. It's an in-house program that is nowhere near as comprehensive as the medical program at West Boca High School. So these in-house programs are actually keeping students at an inferior program, in my opinion, than going to a choice academy program that's already staffed up with everything they need. Let's look at a better example. We have the culinary academy at West Boca High School that the school board approved some years ago at an expense of, $5 or $6 million for that facility. If Spanish River had a culinary in-house program, kids from Spanish River would have to stay there. It might be a home ec program on steroids, but they can't go to the culinary academy at West Boca. We need to address these in-house programs that keep students in a program in a school that's inferior to our choice academies, which we all know they're recognized around the country, the academy programs. So, I just give me the rationale why we should restrict a student from applying to a regular choice academy with all of the bells and whistles that we put in those, and keep them at an in-house program at a school, which is, I think if you compare any of them, Olympic Heights may be an example of not a good comparison because they have a great culinary program at that school that's doing well, but give me rationale why we do this. If we put all this money into these academies and these schools, why would we restrict students from going to some of those academies?
From that perspective, yes, but keep in mind that all the curriculum is exactly the same. You look at the in-house programs at Park Vista. They'll be going to medical in-house simply because there's so many in-house medical programs. It's exactly the same. The standards are the same, the curriculum the same, and I'm glad you recognize the Olympic Heights culinary program, which does not have the facility. West Boca's got an amazing facility. The teacher is cranking out some great numbers of kids that are certified. So it does, from your perspective, it does present a very good question, but we try and make sure that all our programs are aligned, and when you look at an example such as Park Vista's Medical, which is wonderful. We have one down the street at Boynton Beach High now that we opened 2 years ago, and they had a 100% pass rate last week, and they'll be featured on the news. So we're really trying to make sure. The in-house problem occurred about 10 years ago when you had a school such as Royal Palm Beach High that had a medical program, and kids were running from it to go to different other schools, and it dropped down to 83% capacity, and they were able to apply at other schools. Since we've put that in place, Royal Palm's up to 96, 97%, and kids are going to that program and getting the same education. It's our responsibility to make sure it's aligned and it's the same. Facility, though, to the optics, yes, the facility from West Boca Heights, we know, is significantly different, and it does present a problem from that perspective, but our responsibility is to make sure everything is in alignment. So that was the rationale for it, and to make sure that we're staying in line with it. Do we need to review it? We could always review it, but our alignment to a curriculum is the same.
And there's also the cost of transportation
Yes.
that can be added on. And this was also to reduce those issues of cost.
Yeah.
Mr. Barbieri.
So maybe you answered that question to my next question. So why don't we change all the in-house programs to regular programs so that students can go to these different schools without having to be restricted to their own school if they don't want to go to their own school. And maybe we tell them, if there's a school, if it's in your school and you want to go to another school, you pay for your own transportation. I mean, we should take a look at this. If we're going to give kids choice, then let's give them choice and not restrict them to going to a program that they really don't want to be in. I mean, I don't understand why. We should take another look at this. And if it's the transportation is the real reason we do this, then we need to maybe make a policy change that says if you have, academy program at your school and you want to go to one that's 10 miles away, you're going to pay your own fare to get there.
We do allow that for second choice. We also know that a lot of those options are not about the program, it's about the school. We recently were recognized as the best in the country for our choice programs, and it was based on data and equity and how we managed to make sure that we align ourselves to the applications that we receive. So I understand that. I do see that. I get that. But prior to this, we had some very inequitable issues, and we still need to work on them, yes. But when we saw what was happening with the leaving of schools to go to other programs, it was the parents and the students that had the ability and the resources to go, and not the students who relied on our transportation. This was one of the major reasons why we became a very equitable system. We still got work to do, but this was one of the main reasons why, that the students that didn't have the ability to transfer because of transportation to go to other schools.
All right.
And I know where you're coming from, and I understand, and it does need to be looked at, but I see it.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and I like those points, Mr. Barbieri, but another thought, Mr. Licata, many schools have to begin with an in-house program just to get on their feet before they can actually move to the next level. And as you think about the Royal Palm Beach High School programs, I mean, they start small, but as they begin to grow and get where they need to go, then it can actually revert into a full-blown choice. But many times the parents and the school community want to make sure that their children get the first shot when you're starting a new program. Isn't that part of what we talked about?
Yes, and that is a part of it. It's also about making sure our feeder patterns look great, and right now our feeder patterns do look very good. We do have a couple voids that we're trying to work through, and IB was one of them. But I know that Mr. Barbieri points out a very good idea that, the kids in culinary at Heights are doing a great job, but they're not exposed to the kitchen that West Boca has, and where probably their resources or where their future employment would be. And it does raise a question. So it's a difficult problem, but at what risk do we put that through and get back to where we were, where we have a look that's not equitable?
I just want to add also, Dr. Johnson was adding that many of our programs are in-house only, Mr. Barbieri, because of capacity issues, that there's enough kids within the zone school attendance boundaries that they cannot take.
We don't get any out-of-boundary seats.
So, Dr. Robinson?
Dr. Licata, I think you just said something about with second choice, kids with second choice, they could provide their own transportation or something. What was that you said?
Students may apply for any program even if it's in their school for second choice. Their first choice must be in the school in which they reside. So if they're not selected at Boca High for the medical program, let's say it's a student, and there's only 35 seats for in-house, their second choice could be West Boca Medical, and if they do get it, they are able to get to that school. And it doesn't have to do with transportation. If they're in the transportation zone, they'll get it.
Right. Okay, then I misheard you. So I hope we're going to be having a workshop. I actually requested that we start having annual choice workshops, and because I think we need to see the regionalization. We need to look at the spreadsheet of data that we're going to add the kids in the priority attendance area to that spreadsheet, right? And I need you really to essentially prove to me that the curriculum is the same across programs with the same name. And then also we need to look at what's missing, right? What's the demand and what's missing, right? And so, because my pet peeve remains the pre-vet program. Okay? The pre-vet program, and maybe there's a little baby that lives in Lake Park that wants to be a veterinarian, okay? But can't go because we don't provide transportation, okay? So we need to look at, we just need to look at the whole picture. You guys see the whole picture. We see it piece by piece, and I think it's time that we lay it all out and look at the maps and and see who wants what, and who has access to what, and also who is getting the resources to make their program be what it's supposed to be. So the first one I want to see on that spreadsheet is comparing Poinciana to Roosevelt Elementary, so you can prove to me that the curriculum is the same in those schools with the same, supposedly the same program. I need you to prove that to me.
And that would be something we could do, and not to get into it deeply, but Dr. Johnson also will be heading the charge for our summit, our Choice Summit that we have every 3 years. And these are some of the things we're going to cover with the business community and the local colleges and our business partners as well as board members. But we want to make sure that we're answering the needs of the community, and this is where we will do it. And Dr. Johnson will be heading that in charge, because it is a valuable event to see who and what we need. I know we're good, but we can always be better. And these are some of the things, as you're pointing out, that will make us better.
But Ray Ray's mama's not going to be there. So please don't tell me that we're getting all the input from the community. Okay? I'm just saying, Dr. Licata, let's... Okay? Okay.
Mr. Barbieri.
So it sounds like we're beating up on you, Dr. Licata, but so we just won an award. What was the award for? Because I think the district has got one of the finest choice programs in the entire country. So what did we just win an award for?
I compare it to a Ferrari. When you look at a Ferrari, you notice the little speck in the paint that's a problem, and we're that good. You get to see some things and imperfections. But we did win an award for the best district in the country for equity and sustainability, and it's based on data. It's not a popularity contest, and we'll celebrate that next week. So,
Dr. Robinson wants you to share the data.
It was shared at the meeting last month regarding our applications and the amount of students in diversity that did get in there within 1%. We're matching to the amount of applications. So our data looks very good, and we share it every year in the big report at the beginning of the year once we make all the placements, and I think you have a copy of that as well. I think it's called the Dr. Robinson Report, as a matter of fact.
Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. And I was going to do the same thing that Mr. Barbieri just did. I was going to say that I just want to thank you for all that you do, because it does sound like you're being beaten up. But I got to tell you, when I go out in the public, the choice programs are the one thing that everybody applauds. We just have such a wonderful array. The students are leaving, knowing what they want to do, and in many cases with their future, or changing what they want to do. And the best testimony to what you're doing is when you go out to the fairgrounds, when we can go out and see your program. So thank you.
All right, Mrs. Andrews.
And ditto, Royal Palm Beach has done a fabulous job, the new Navy Junior ROTC program there, as well as all the elementary, middle school, and high school programs that are actually feeding into each other. Fabulous, and not even to mention the kinds of things we're doing out in the Glades. So keep up the great work.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, we'll call the question on this. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next item, and at this time, give everybody a moment to refresh your computers, if you haven't already done that, to add the item that Mr. Barbieri pulled. Our next item is Policy 01, Student Assignment. Dr. Fenoy.
I recommend the board approve development of proposed revised policy 5.01, student assignment.
Is there a motion? Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Mr. Barbieri. Mrs. Brill, you pulled this one.
Thank you. I have a question, and I have a one-word change. So I'll wait till they get settled. Everybody good? Okay, so I do have a one-word change, but I also have a question. So my question is, has to do with, it's talking about students being assigned in the beginning on line 6. Students shall be assigned to schools based on their residence of their student parents or legal guardians, as stated below. What do we do in the case of a divorce where parents have equal shared custody and they live in different areas?
Want me to? And I can answer that. If it's 50-50, oftentimes there's a court order that will state, and we go by what the court order says. And For instance, if it's 50-50 and it says the residents will, for school, will be determined by the residence of the dad, we will follow that. Otherwise, it could be either one.
Thank you. And then just as a follow-up, they can switch if they, decide to, if it's 50-50 and there's no court order.
I don't have the policy in front of me right this second, which is the other policy, but I believe it states that if it's 50-50, they have a choice. If
Thank
there's
you.
no court order stating that it should be one parent.
And then my word change, okay, is at line 302. I'll just read the line, the paragraph. ABC recommendations will be presented to the superintendent. Dissenting viewpoints may also be presented to the superintendent. I would like to propose that instead of saying dissenting viewpoints may be presented, I'd like it that they will be presented to the superintendent, because I think the superintendent should know about whatever dissenting views are put forward.
Mr. Littlejohn, since we're in development on this, does the board need to take action or a consensus, or can we just leave that up to staff?
They could vote.
I think you can direct staff and see what they bring back
Okay,
for you.
let's do it. Mrs. Brill, would you make a motion then to amend the?
I move that we amend line 302 to read dissenting viewpoints will also be presented to the superintendent.
Okay, we have a motion, a second by Mr. Barbieri. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we'll call a question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. So, all right, thank you. Our next item is policy 02.
I recommend the board approve development of proposed revised policy 5.012, Advisory Boundary Committee.
Is there a motion? Motion by Dr. Robinson, second by Mrs. Andrews. Mr. Barbieri.
I'm sorry, yes, on this one. My question was, let me get to the right one, I'm sorry. Why do we require a vote of the full board for each one of us to make our own appointment? Where did that come from? I mean, we've always had the right to appoint to the different committees, so why now do we have to ask our colleagues if they'll allow us to appoint somebody that we want to appoint to one of the committees that are board advisory committees?
Okay, we were being consistent with what we've done with the Board Advisory Committee appointees as well as to board member appointees, merely because the board is a collective body and acts as a collective body, and therefore, for their appointees, the board member can select someone, but the board as a whole would vote for them all. And we've been doing that for the Board Advisory Committee appointees by the board for the last year or so.
So are you going to change audit and Cork and all the other committees that we point to?
Yes, it's been done for them, where you've made an appointment and then it's been coming to the board for approval.
We have?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was always in consent.
Okay. It's fine. If you don't vote for mine, I'm not going to vote for yours. That's the way it'll work.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, all opposed. Motion carries 6-0. That concludes our regular part of the agenda. We did skip one thing. I skipped the superintendent comments and board member comments, and I understand Dr. Fenoy has some comments he'd like to make.
Yes, I'd just like to quickly say that I am terribly excited about shaking the hands of thousands of graduates this month. I always love to see the relieved look on parents' faces when their babies walk across that stage. And I like to say to each of our 22+ thousand employees who had a major contribution to these children's success that they've done it, and we're looking forward to this great time celebrating with our families and kids. Thank you.
I just showed Dr. Robinson. I have a bruise from last year shaking hands, so Dr. Fenoy, look forward to that. So with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Barbieri, second by Mrs. Brill. All in favor, all opposed. We stand adjourned.